Hi, welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. Today we continue our in-depth look at the Beach Boys' 1972 album, Carl and the Passion So Tough. And we've got 6 more tracks to get to, so let's not waste any time. I do want to briefly say that in these 3 cubicles, as I did last time, I've displayed some of the new and notable releases that you might have seen on record store shelves had you walked in to buy a copy of this on its release date, May 15th, 1972. The second track on the album is by Blondie Chaplin and Ricky Fataar, so let's talk about their tracks next. Both of Blondie and Ricky's tracks were produced by Ricky Fataar, which may be the reason that the drum is so far forward in the mix on both those tracks. It's not a complaint, just an observation. I love Ricky's drumming, and to my ears, having that drum so prominent sounds really cool. The distinctive upright piano on both tracks is played by Alex Del Zoppo, leader of Sweetwater, the band that opened the 1969 Woodstock Festival. That's Alex in the lower left in this photo. Much later, in 1999, they were the subject of VH1's first made-for-TV film, Sweetwater, A True Rock Story. Ricky briefly drummed for Sweetwater after the Flame broke up in 1971, which is how he met Del Zoppo. Ricky played drums on 8 of the 10 tracks on Sweetwater's 1971 album, Melon. As you might expect, Del Zoppo says it was Ricky who invited him to take part in the sessions. Additionally, both tracks feature Carl Wilson, and the first Blondie and Ricky track on the album, Here She Comes, includes playing by Billy Hinchy. As I've said before, as beloved as Blondie and Ricky are now and as integral as they seem to the period, as a Beach Boy fan and a record buyer in 1972, I think I'd have been a little disappointed to pick up this album and find that 2 of the songs are by new guys who I would have probably known nothing about. It'd be like buying an album and finding out that 25% of it was by somebody else. That said, both of these tracks are pretty great, and I now would not trade them for anything in the world. The first one, Here She Comes, admittedly does not sound very much like anything we'd come to expect from the Beach Boys. In the comments section recently, viewer Michael Lukens pointed out that the track seems to be Crosby, Stills, and Nash influenced. Certainly, the vocals sound more like Crosby, Stills, and Nash than they do the Beach Boys. Others have pointed out that the entire track sounds like Steve Winwood and Traffic more than it does the Beach Boys. In any case, I'm okay with these contemporary influences as long as the track is good, and this is an excellent track by any standard. The second Blondie and Ricky track on the album, the countrified Hold On Dear Brother, kicks off side 2. It was also released as the B-side of Marcella on June 26, 1972. The song was written as encouragement and support for Ricky's brother, Edris Brother Fataar, who was having a hard time and struggling with depression in the wake of the breakup of the Flames, or the Flame, which he'd been part of along with his older brother Steve since their formation in 1962. Reportedly, Steve and Brother were not particularly happy living in California. Steve Fataar returned to South Africa after the Flame broke up. Brother Fataar left the U.S. going either to South Africa or to England, depending on which source you read. Brother Fataar passed away in 1978. Of course, in the song, brother can be interpreted in many ways by the listener. Many have assumed that the song is about Brian. More generally, brother can be applied to just about anybody. I'm sure these multiple interpretations were not lost on Ricky and Blondie when the song was written. Musically, this is the most countrified Beach Boy recording up to this point, country music being very much in vogue as an influence in rock at the time. It's kind of ironic that it took a couple of South African players to bring this very American influence to the Beach Boys' music, but we hear more of this on the upcoming Holland album, of course. And speaking of country influences, the distinctive pedal steel guitar is played by the great session man Orville Red Rhodes, who played pedal steel on everybody's records from the Ventures to the Byrds to the Carpenters, including Linda Ronstadt, James Taylor, Carole King, Harry Nilsson, Steve Marriott, Joan Baez, and Billy Preston, among many others. He's probably most remembered as a key member of Michael Nesmith's first and second national bands in the early 70s. Even after, Rhodes was featured on nearly all of Nesmith's albums. In the 60s and early 70s, he also did a number of solo albums showcasing pedal steel guitar, including 1973's A Velvet Hammer and a Cowboy Band, produced by Nesmith. I have no idea if Michael Nesmith suggested that album title, but there's something very Nesmith-esque about it. In the late 70s, Rhodes shifted away from performing and opened the Red Rhodes Amplifier Service Shop in Hollywood, where he modified amplifiers and created custom pickups for a lot of big-name guitarists. He passed away in 1995. Like Here She Comes, Hold On Dear Brother doesn't sound much like what we'd come to expect from the Beach Boys. Expanding the horizons was the point in 1972, and these changes in styles are a large part of what makes the period interesting. It's another nice track. Sometime in December 71 or January 72, Mike, Alan, and their families had gone to the Hotel Bahai del Este in Majorca, Spain, where they joined 2,000 other devotees to learn from the Maharishi how to teach transcendental meditation. The Maharishi was in need of a lot of new TM teachers. It was at this time that he announced his world plan to solve age-old problems of mankind in this generation. Part of the world plan was to establish one TM center for every 1 million of the world's population, which in 1972 would have been 3,837 TM centers, with about another 100 centers needed every year. Mike and Alan stayed until early or mid-March 1972, with a break of a few days in late February to make appearances with the Beach Boys in Holland, and they completed their training to become certified TM instructors. Mike and Alan obviously returned eager to spread the word about transcendental meditation through song. The Maharishi's world plan is mentioned in the very first line of their song, He Come Down. This song had originated with Alan, who wanted to write a gospel number. As with All This Is That, he invited Mike to work with them, and the two of them enlisted Brian to try to get him more involved with the album. Brian seems to have developed some genuine enthusiasm for the song, and according to Blondie Chaplin, it was Brian who enlisted him to sing a co-lead vocal on the song, giving Blondie his first vocal with the group. The verses pack in references to Jesus, Krishna, saints, Guru Dev, and of course, plenty of the Maharishi. It's certainly not the first time in recent history that a popular song had mixed East and West. George Harrison, of course, had thrown in Hare Krishnas with the Hallelujahs on My Sweet Lord a year and a half earlier. I've got no doubt that this was on their minds. The song might possibly also owe something to Brewer and Shipley's early 1971 hit, One Toke Over the Line. They seem to be going for some pantheistic outlook with lines like, all of the saints through all creation sing the same song of revelation. I'm not sure whether transcendental meditation is really a theism or if it's a healthy, calming exercise. As we discussed when we talked about the Friends album, this was apparently a point of contention even among some of the Maharishi's longtime followers. In any case, the Maharishi is portrayed among some very divine company in these lyrics, and there's a sort of soapbox shouting, pamphlet waving dogma to the jam-packed verses that I have to admit I find off-putting. It's nice to hear the group try something different, though to my mind, gospel is not a natural fit for the Beach Boys. The piano and organ opening is quite nice, musically the verses work quite well, and there's a wordless vocal section in the middle that's quite beautiful. The singing on the choruses is loose to the point of sloppiness and over the top for the Beach Boys, making it come off more as a parody of gospel than something genuine, with some of the down in my hearts and I believe it's getting a little shrill and out of control. Of course, I am probably in the minority with this view. In his essay in the recent Sail on Sailor set, Howie Edelson heaps praise on the vocals, calling them arguably the finest group vocals on the record. He calls it a brilliant collaboration between Mike, Brian, and Al that all involved can't help but still rave about. And he goes on praising the song for several paragraphs. I would never try to talk anybody out of a song that they love, but honestly, I'm just not feeling it with He Come Down. If nothing else, at 4 minutes and 40 seconds, the song is just too long. You could take out a full 2 minutes of I Believe It's, and they would not be missed. It's far from a terrible song. As I say, it's got some very nice moments, and when I say it's my least favorite song on the album, do keep in mind that I love this album. I look forward to your feedback. Am I really that crazy and that off base on this song? Anyway, let me know what you think. Al and Mike certainly more than make up for it with their other composition, this one co-written by Carl, All This Is That, the penultimate song on the album, and I think this is the first and probably only time before the 1980s anyway, that arguably the strongest track on a Beach Boys album doesn't have a Brian co-writing credit. But again, how are you really going to rank songs as different as All This Is That and Marcella against each other? Anyway, All This Is That began again with Alan, who was setting Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken to music. The poem first appeared in the August 1915 edition of the Atlantic Monthly as part of a group of Robert Frost poems billed as A Group of Poems by Robert Frost. And it opened the Frost poetry collection Mountain Interval, published in 1916. Recently, we've all happily been able to hear Alan's early version of the song on the Sail on Sailor box set. As with He Come Down, Alan invited Mike to help him write the song. Mike's part, I am that, thou art that, and all this is that, reportedly is something he heard from the Maharishi and came from the Vedas, a collection of ancient Hindu scriptures. The phrase Carl sings, Jai Guru Dev, which translates roughly as thanks to the heavenly teacher or victory to the great consciousness, was already well known to rock fans for its inclusion in the Beatles' Across the Universe, which had first been recorded in 1968 prior to their trip to India to study meditation with the Maharishi. That version remained unreleased at the time. In 1972, people would have been familiar with it from the version that appeared on the Beatles' 1970 post-breakup album, Let It Be. Where He Come Down shouts the praises of the Maharishi, All This Is That is a fantastically warm invitation to meditate. It's soaringly, cosmically beautiful, one of the great tracks of the era. As I've said before, there are just a few recordings from this period where it seems like the Beach Boys were almost pioneering a new genre of music, a kind of transcendental doo-wop. I wish they'd continued along those lines. As it is, this is one of my favorite Beach Boy recordings, really one of my favorite recordings by anybody of all time. The album is filled out with 2 tracks from Dennis's unfinished solo album recorded in 1971 and finished for Carl and the Passions. Dennis had been shut out of last year's Surf's Up. I always get the feeling that the group turned to Dennis here simply because they were short of material, not from any particular desire to showcase his talent. I get the same impression from the unused bamboo tracks used to fill out the Light album in 1978. In both cases, Dennis's tracks turn out to be highlights of their albums. Both of Dennis's tracks were co-written by Beach Boys band member and Dennis's frequent collaborator at the time, Daryl Dragon. Both feature Stevens or Steve LaFever, the famous session man on electric bass. In 1961, he made an album of his own with pianist Jack Elton, An Evening at Dino's Lodge, where, according to the liner notes, they were the house band at the time. Dean Martin provided a testimonial on the back cover of the album. Just look at it this way. I found Jack and Steve 3 years ago and they're still packing them in for me. They make great music. Besides, Jack is Scotch. I'll have the same, tall glass, water on the side. Both of Dennis's tracks, of course, feature heavy, lush orchestration. The first to appear on the album, Make It Good, is a nice piece of work that's always sounded to me like it might possibly have been meant as a coda for something else. Seems maybe like it's a little incomplete. I think it also suffers by the fact that it's stuck unceremoniously in the middle of side 2, and by the fact that 2 tracks later you get Cuddle Up, a much grander song that works in the same general vein and kind of overshadows a nice piece of work in Make It Good. The orchestra on both tracks is credited as arranged by Dennis and Brian with Daryl Dragon, produced by Daryl Dragon. And I think the arrangements might take some of their inspiration from Paul Buckmaster's orchestral coda on the Rolling Stones' Moonlight Mile from their Sticky Fingers album in 1971. Among the backing vocalists on Cuddle Up and possibly also on Make It Good is Toni Tennille, who was part of the Beach Boys touring band during this period. She and Daryl Dragon eventually left the band to try their luck at performing as a duo. I wonder whatever happened to them. The album's finale, Cuddle Up, was also released as the B-side of You Need a Mess of Help to Stand Alone on May 15th. Cuddle Up is another highlight of the album. It's incredibly gentle with quiet piano passages that build to huge orchestral swells and then subside again over its 5-minute and 30-second running time. It's a beautiful track and a great way to close Carl and the Passions. Of the album, Mike Love said, "It was a disjointed rush job, hastily assembled between live gigs that even Carl admitted was weak overall. More than anything, the album emphasized how confused we were about our brand." Alan says it's hard to assess the album because it's a bunch of different pieces, and that one of the reasons they call it Carl and the Passions is because they didn't want to call it the Beach Boys. He suggests it should have been called Spare Parts. Coming after 2020, Sunflower, and Surf's Up, all of which had big, complex productions and 10 or 12 tracks, Carl and the Passions seems curiously offhand. All of those albums feel like they were agonized over, with lots of prolonged sessions and going back to the drawing board to rework things. Brian's tracks seem to have been recorded in just a few sessions in December 71, plus a day in January and a day in February. Mike and Alan's tracks, apart from some later overdubs, seem to have been cut on April 12th. Blondie and Ricky's tracks seem to have been recorded on April 18th and 19th. Of course, Dennis's tracks were left over from his 1971 solo sessions. They were taken out and polished up in some sessions also in April. It seems like the recording sessions were just jammed in around touring commitments. They toured all through mid and late March and played shows on at least 12 of the 30 days of April when they were primarily cutting the album. It seems as if nobody remembered to leave time for the band to cut an album. Under those circumstances, what they came up with is actually quite remarkable. All the individual tracks are enjoyable and even include a couple of my all-time favorite Beach Boy recordings among them. As a whole, to me, it doesn't quite add up to an album somehow. Compare it to the group's other early 70s albums and you'll see what I mean. What's there is great, but it feels almost like a giant EP or a mini album, not quite a fully developed album. Drop in just a couple more strong songs and they'd have really had something. This is also their first album since Friends, not to draw on anything from the Smile sessions, which had provided big finales to their last 3 albums. It certainly seems like it's about time for them to move on from Smile, but it does rob them of the big ending that they'd had on those records, which Cuddle Up kind of makes up for. And whatever Warner's rationale for packaging Pet Sounds with Carl and the Passions in the US, it always gave me the impression that the label didn't think the album could stand on its own. It probably contributes in some way to my impression that the whole is slightly less than the sum of the parts. In his autobiography, Mike Love said the decision to package the albums together undermined the whole marketing strategy. The whole thing looked slightly suspect somehow. Were they using Pet Sounds' reputation to prop up Carl and the Passions, or were they throwing in an unwanted Beach Boys album if you bought Pet Sounds? Either way, I don't think that there's any way these two albums would compare favorably to each other, or that the inclusion of Pet Sounds helped the fortunes of Carl and the Passions. Nevertheless, the album went to number 50 in the US, number 25 in the UK. Surf's Up had gone to number 29 and number 15 a year earlier, far from the disastrous showing of Sunflower at 151 in the US in 1970, but still, things were trending slightly in the wrong direction. Whatever the charting, it's now a beloved album by me and many Beach Boy fans, one of my all-time favorite Beach Boy periods, and certainly something that I go back to again and again. Hope you enjoyed this in-depth look at Carl and the Passion So Tough. I look forward to your comments. We'll see you next time when we will continue on talking about U.S. pop culture in the year 1972. Please hit like and subscribe if you haven't done that. I always appreciate it. And we will see you next time. Bye.